The galaxy had already passed judgment on humanity. We were a footnote in the cosmic archives, a failed experiment in sentient evolution, filed under extinction event self-inflicted. Earth was a ghost, a silent monument to a species that had reached for the stars and fumbled, its final broadcasts swallowed by the uncaring void. Centuries ago, the great galactic powers, the crystalline silax, the gaseous minds of the Oort ascendancy, the machine intellects of the Cygnian axis had observed the fall, noted it with dispassionate curiosity, and moved on. To them, we were little more than cosmic dust, a brief, noisy flare that had burned itself out. But a handful of us had escaped the final cataclysm, fleeing in a ragtag flotilla of generation ships and long-haul freighters. We didn't seek a new empire. We sought only a quiet corner to hide, to remember, and to survive. We found it in a place the star charts called the Serpent's Coil, a treacherous, swirling nebula of charged particles and gravitational anomalies that the major races deemed unworthy of exploration. Here, amongst the celestial wreckage and stellar nurseries, we built our refuge, a collection of interconnected habitats drilled into the heart of a colossal, rogue asteroid we named Haven. For 200 years, we lived in the shadows, a secret kept by the nebula's violent temper. Our only link to the galaxy we once dreamed of joining was the Nomad, a vessel that embodied our fallen state and our stubborn will to endure. She wasn't a warship. She had been born the ISV Prospector's Folly, a heavy-class salvage hauler designed to crack open the hulls of dead starships and feast on their technological bones. Now, stripped down, rebuilt, and patched with the ghosts of 100 different ships from a dozen different species, she was simply the Nomad. Her hull was a mismatched quilt of alloys, scarred by micrometeoroids and cosmic radiation. Her engines were a temperamental fusion of human brute force engineering and salvaged silax gravitic drivers that hummed with a constant, whirring tremor. Her weapons were a joke by galactic standards, a forward-mounted plasma cutter meant for slicing through derelict bulkheads, a series of repurposed kinetic mining charges, and a magnetic grapple system powerful enough to snag a small moon. She was slow, ugly, and perpetually on the verge of catastrophic failure. But she was ours, and she was Haven's sole guardian. I was Captain Eva Rostova, and the Nomad was as much a part of me as my own prosthetic arm, a relic of a salvage accident that had taught me the cold, unforgiving calculus of space. My crew wasn't military. They were engineers, scavengers, and pilots who had been born in the deep dark. People who knew how to coax life from dying systems and navigate the Serpent's Coil by instinct. My first mate, Kalen, was a wiry astrophysicist whose ancestors had mapped the nebula, his mind a living chart of its deadly currents and hidden passages. Our chief engineer, Anya, could diagnose an engine malfunction from the subtle change in the vibration under her feet and could hold the ship together with little more than industrial sealant and a string of colorful curses. We were a family of ghosts, haunting the graveyard of the galaxy in our ghost ship, and our mission was simple: patrol the edge of the coil, watch for intruders, and scavenge what we needed to keep the lights on back at Haven. For years, the patrols were quiet, punctuated only by the discovery of ancient, derelict vessels caught in the nebula's grip silent tombs we would carefully dissect for parts, fuel, and data. The galaxy, it seemed, had forgotten us as thoroughly as we had tried to forget it. But the universe has a long memory and a cruel sense of irony. It was on a routine sweep of the outer veil that our long-range sensors picked up something impossible: a single, non-human vessel, moving with a silent, effortless grace that bespoke a level of technology we could only dream of. It was a teardrop of polished, obsidian material, seamless and utterly alien, cutting through the nebula's chaotic gas clouds as if they were nothing more than mist. Kalen's face was pale in the glow of his console. "No energy signature I recognize, Captain," he whispered, his voice tight. "It's quiet, too quiet. It's absorbing all our active scans. The only reason we see it is because it's blocking the starlight behind it." My gut went cold. This wasn't a pirate or a lost freighter. This was something else. Magnify image. Cross-reference with the archives. Everything we have on known galactic powers. The archive was a pathetic thing, cobbled together from the data cores of ships we'd salvaged. A fragmented history of the galaxy that had cast us out. For a tense minute, the only sound on the bridge was the hum of the life support and the frantic clicking of Kalen's console. Then, an image appeared on the main viewer, a piece of Silax artwork depicting a similar vessel. Below it, a single word, Vex. Anya's voice crackled over the comm from engineering. "Captain, whatever that thing is, it's putting out a passive energy field that's making our gravitic drivers shake like a leaf in a hurricane. I don't know how long we can hold this position without them shearing off their mountings." The Vex. We knew the name only from whispers and fragmented data logs. They weren't conquerors like the old empires. They were collectors, archivists. They roamed the galaxy in their silent, black ships, observing, cataloging, and, when they deemed a species sufficiently interesting or historically significant, they would preserve them. It wasn't an act of war, it was an act of curation. They would descend upon a world, pacify the population with incomprehensible technology, and transport the entire culture, its people, its art, its cities into vast, simulated realities aboard their colossal archive ships. To the Vex, it was an honor. To the species they collected, it was the end of everything. They wouldn't kill us. They would turn us into a museum exhibit. "They can't know we're here," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "They can't find Haven." The obsidian ship drifted silently, a predator tasting the air. It hadn't seen us yet. Our ship's low-tech signature and the nebula's background radiation were our only camouflage. "It's deploying probes," Kalen reported, his knuckles white as he gripped his console. Dozens of them, spreading out in a wide search pattern. They're small, fast, and they're mapping the nebula's gravitational tides. They're not just passing through, they're searching. A cold dread washed over me. We had two choices. We could run, try to lose ourselves deeper in the Serpent's Coil, and pray the Vex ship eventually moved on. But the probes were methodical. They would find Haven eventually. Or we could fight. We could face this single technologically divine vessel in our flying scrapyard and try to do the impossible, scare it away. To make this small and forgotten corner of the galaxy seem more trouble than it was worth. "Anya," I said into the comm, my decision made. "I need everything you can give me. Divert life support from non-essential decks to the engines and the plasma cutter. I want that thing running so hot it glows. You're planning on fighting it." Anya's voice was incredulous. "Eva, our cutter can barely slice through a derelict's hull. That ship is made of, I don't even know what it's made of." "We're not going to cut it," I replied, my eyes fixed on the Vex ship. "We're going to make a lot of noise. Kalen, plot a course through the wreckage belt. Take us past the old Silax dreadnought and get our mining charges ready." Kalen's eyes widened in understanding. "You're going to use the belt as cover." "More than cover," I said, a grim smile touching my lips. I'm going to use it as a weapon." The Nomad shuddered as power was shunted from across the ship. The lights on the bridge dimmed, and the air grew colder, but the low thrum of the plasma cutter's capacitor banks began to rise in pitch, a promise of violence. I steered our ugly yet beautiful ship into the densest part of the nebula, a graveyard of ancient starships from a long-forgotten war, their colossal, shattered hulls drifting like silent monuments to greater powers. The Vex ship, its curiosity piqued by our sudden burst of energy, altered its course and followed. The hunt had begun. The wreckage belt was our home turf, a chaotic maze of twisted metal and dormant technology that we had navigated for decades. To the Vex, it was an uncatalogued anomaly. To us, it was an arsenal. "Bring us in close to the dreadnought's spine," I ordered, my hand steady on the helm. The Nomad groaned in protest as we maneuvered through the debris field, our hull scraping against the shattered remnants of a cruiser's wing. The Vex ship followed, effortless and silent, its sleek form a stark contrast to the angular, broken ships around us. It was faster, more agile, but it was also cautious, its sensors likely working overtime to analyze the strange, radiation-soaked environment. That was our only advantage. It was an explorer in a place we knew by heart. "They're gaining," Kalen said, his voice tense. "They're scanning our ship, trying to get a lock." "Let them," I grunted, guiding the Nomad into the shadow of the colossal Silax dreadnought, a mountain of crystalline alloy half a kilometer long. "Anya, status on the cutter. Capacitors are at 90% and climbing," she crackled back. "Any hotter and they'll melt through the deck plates. Whatever you're gonna do it soon." We hugged the dreadnought's hull, using its massive form to break the Vex's line of sight. On the main viewer, I watched the teardrop-shaped ship glide past, its probes sweeping the area. "Now, Kalen," I commanded, "launch a single mining charge. Set it for proximity detonation and target that old comms relay on the dreadnought." A small hatch opened on the Nomad's belly, and a dull, gray cylinder shot out, molding through the void before attaching itself to the shattered remains of a Silax antenna array. The Vex ship, detecting the movement, turned its attention toward the charge. "Full power to the cutter," I roared. "Fire on my mark." The forward section of the Nomad glowed with a fierce blue-white energy as the plasma cutter reached maximum charge. The Vex ship, seemingly deciding the mining charge was the greater threat, fired a beam of pure blackness at it, a sliver of void that simply erased the charge from existence, but it was the distraction I needed. "Mark!" I yelled, slamming my fist down on the firing stud. A torrent of incandescent plasma, a tool designed for salvage, erupted from the Nomad's bow. It wasn't aimed at the Vex ship. It was aimed at the dreadnought's primary power conduit, a thick, armored channel that Anya had told me years ago still held a residual charge. The plasma beam, crude and unfocused compared to a true weapon, slammed into the ancient warship. For a second, nothing happened. Then, the conduit overloaded. 200,000 tons of dormant Silax warship convulsed as millennia of stored energy arced through its dead systems. Lights flickered across its crystalline hull, and a massive electromagnetic pulse, the death scream of a Titan, erupted outwards. The Vex ship was caught completely off guard. Its advanced systems, designed to operate in the clean, orderly space of civilized star systems, were instantly overwhelmed by the raw, chaotic energy blast. The ship's seamless black hull flickered with frantic, rainbow-hued discharges. On our bridge, alarms screamed as the pulse washed over us. But the Nomad, with its primitive, unshielded systems and thick, simple wiring, took the hit like a punch-drunk boxer, staggering, but still standing. Anya's voice was a triumphant shout over the comm. Their field is down. Their energy readings are all over the place. We hit them. Ava, we actually hit them. The Vex ship tumbled. Its graceful flight disrupted for the first time. It was wounded, confused, but I knew it wasn't defeated. This is our only chance, I said, my voice low and urgent. Kaylin, get the grapple ready. Anya, give me a short, controlled burst from the gravitic drivers, just enough to push us forward. We're not running. We're going to get its attention. We were a scavenger ship, a bottom feeder, and we were about to try and bite a shark. The Nomad lurched forward, emerging from the dreadnought's shadow and heading straight for the disoriented Vex vessel. We were showing ourselves willingly. For the first time, it was the most reckless, insane gamble of my life. And it felt more right than anything I had ever done. The galaxy thought we were dead and gone. It was time to remind it that humanity was still here, and that we did not go quietly. The silence on the bridge of the Nomad was a fragile thing, stretched taut over the thrum of overloaded systems and the ragged sound of our own breathing. Out in the void, the Vex ship tumbled, a wounded god bleeding rainbows of energy into the black. We had done the impossible. We had heard it. For a fleeting moment, a wild, fierce pride surged through me. We were humanity. We were the ghosts who refused to fade, I say, and we had just rattled the cage of a cosmic curator, but triumph is a luxury, and we were bankrupt. The Vex was disoriented, not dead, and every second we wasted was a second it had to heal. Kaylin, lock the primary grapple on its central axis, I commanded, my voice cutting through the stunned quiet. Anya, get ready to give me a reverse burn the instant we make contact. I don't want to pull it. I want an anchor. I want it to know we're not afraid to touch it. Kaylin's fingers flew across his console, his face a mask of grim focus. It's still hemorrhaging energy. Captain, their internal systems must be in chaos. But, Eva, what are we hoping to accomplish? Our grapple is a glorified tow cable. Every species has a threat response, I said, my gaze locked on the tumbling alien vessel. Fight or flight. We're too slow to run. So we're going to give it a fight it doesn't understand. It thinks in terms of technological tiers and energy outputs. We're going to give it unpredictable, brute force. The forward grapple launcher fired with a deafening clang that resonated through the entire ship. A massive, four-pronged claw, connected by a thick metallic composite tether, shot across the 100 meters of space separating us, its magnetic field shimmering visibly in the nebula's charged dust. It struck the obsidian hull of the Vex ship with a solid thud, but there was no clang of metal on metal. It was a dead sound, like a rock hitting packed earth. For a heartbeat, the claws failed to find a purchase on the seamless surface. Then, with a surge of power from our generators, the magnets bit deep, locking onto some unseen ferromagnetic structure beneath the alien skin. Contact, we're latched on, Kaylin yelled. The instant the connection solidified, his console lit up like a supernova. Gods above, Captain. It's not just a physical connection. The magnetic field is creating a data bridge. I don't even know what I'm getting. It's not code. It's raw sensory data, concepts, geometries that make my head hurt. On the main screen, Flashes of incomprehensible information blinked in and out of existence. We saw glimpses of swirling, gaseous beings encased in shimmering containment fields, their thoughts translated into crystalline patterns. We saw a civilization of silicon-based life forms, their entire planetary crust cataloged and replicated down to the last microbe. We saw star charts not of systems, but of cultures labeled with cold, analytical classifications, Tier 4 pre-warp, aggressive, preservation priority, low. And we saw a file, newly created, a flickering icon that looked disturbingly like a crude schematic of the Nomad. Below it, the classification was chilling, unidentified anomaly, Tier 1 salvage tech, unpredictable, preservation priority high. They weren't just seeing us as a threat. They were seeing us as a prize exhibit. Cut the connection. I snapped, a primal fear clutching at my throat. Kalen, sever the link now. I can't, he stammered, his hands flying over controls that were no longer responding. They're holding it open. They're not just reading us. They're pulling data from our systems. Navigation, life support, our history archives from Haven. The Vex ship had stopped tumbling. The wild energy discharges ceased, and its obsidian hull became a perfect, unblemished black once more. It was no longer wounded. It was listening. A low hum vibrated through our hull, traveling up the grapple tether like a serpent. It wasn't a sound. It was a frequency. A resonant vibration that made the metal around us feel alive. Anya's voice, strained with panic, screamed over the comm. Eva, get us out of here. The grapple winch is melting. The tether isn't just a tether anymore. It's a conduit. They're feeding energy back into it. It's restructuring itself on a molecular level. The metal is flowing. I looked at the viewer and felt my blood run cold. She was right. The thick, woven cable of our grapple was changing. The dull, gray composite was turning the same obsidian black as the Vex ship, smoothing out, its texture becoming seamless. Alien, the transformation was crawling up the tether, moving steadily, unstoppably, toward the Nomad. The Vex wasn't going to fire on us. It wasn't going to destroy us. It was going to assimilate us, starting with the very tool we had used to attack it. Reverse thrust, I yelled. Full power. The Nomad's engines roared, trying to pull away, but it was like being chained to a mountain. The Vex ship didn't even budge. The strain on our hull was immense. Alarms blared as stress fractures began to appear on the forward bulkhead. The Vex was using our own tether to reel us in, not with force, but by simply shortening the distance, molecule by molecule. We were caught. Our desperate act of defiance had turned into a suicide trap. My mind raced, sifting through the wreckage of a dozen bad options. We couldn't cut the cable. It was no longer our cable to cut. We couldn't overpower it. The tether was now a part of the Vex ship, an extension of its will. The emitter, I breathed, an idea taking shape, born of pure desperation. Anya, can you overload the grapple's magnetic emitter, not just a surge, a catastrophic failure? I want you to blow the whole assembly clear off the ship. There was a pause, and I could hear the frantic hiss of coolant vents and the shriek of tortured metal from her engineering bay. Are you insane? That's a controlled reactor breach. It'll tear the whole bow apart. We'll lose our primary salvage tool, our main sensor pallet, half our forward armor. We're about to lose the whole ship, I countered, my voice raw. Can you do it? I can try, she said, her voice grim. But It's not a switch. Eva, I have to bypass every safety protocol we have. It'll take a minute. You have 30 seconds, I told her, watching the black alien texture creep ever closer to our hull. Kalen, all remaining power to the aft shields. When that thing blows, the shrapnel is going to be moving faster than a kinetic round. Brace for impact. The bridge became a frantic ballet of desperation. Kalen rerouted power, his face illuminated by the cascade of warning lights. I held the helm steady, my knuckles white, my prosthetic arm feeling cold and heavy. On the viewer, the Vex ship remained impassive, a silent black void that was slowly, methodically devouring us. The hum intensified, vibrating in my teeth, in my bones. It felt like the ship itself was screaming. 20 seconds. The blackness was just meters from our bow. 15. I could see the hull plates around the grapple launcher begin to buckle and warp. 10. A single center-piercing alarm began to sound the final, irreversible countdown for the emitter overload. It's now or never. Anya, I shouted into the comm. Do it. Forgive me for this, she whispered. There was no sound at first, only a flash of pure, violent light from the Nomad's bow. The magnetic emitter, the heart of our salvage system, detonated with the force of a small warhead. The forward view screen went white, blinded by the blast. Our ship, our beautiful, ugly home, screamed as it was torn apart. We were thrown backward with bone-jarring force, the explosion acting like a massive, uncontrolled thruster. Shrapnel from our own hull peppered the aft shields, which flared brilliantly before collapsing. On the bridge, consoles exploded in a shower of sparks, and I was thrown from my chair, my head cracking against a support beam. Darkness swam at the edge of my vision. For a moment, there was only the ringing in my ears and the acrid smell of burnt electronics. Then, slowly, the emergency lights flickered on, casting the bridge in a hellish red glow. I pushed myself up, my head throbbing. Kalen was slumped over his console, but he was stirring. The front of the bridge was a scene of utter devastation. The main view screen was shattered, and through the jagged hole, I could see the stars in a gaping, smoking crater where our entire forward salvage assembly used to be. But we were free. The tether was gone, vaporized in the blast. We were drifting, crippled and bleeding atmosphere, but we were free. I crawled back to the helm, my body aching with 1,000 protests. The ship was barely responding, but the engines were, miraculously, still online. Status, I croaked, my voice hoarse. Kalen pushed himself up, wiping a smear of blood from his forehead. Forward hull breach. We're venting atmosphere from decks 1 through 3. Life support is failing. Shields are gone. We're alive. Captain, I don't know how, but we are. My relief was short-lived. As the smoke cleared and my vision focused on the space before us, I saw the Vex ship. It was pristine, untouched by the explosion. It hung there, patient and silent. We had mutilated ourselves to escape, and it hadn't sustained a scratch. It had learned from the EMP. It had learned from our grapple. It had analyzed our desperation, and now it was done analyzing. A thin sliver of its obsidian hull peeled back, not with a mechanical hiss, but with the silent, organic fluidity of living tissue. From the opening emerged a new probe, but this wasn't like the others. It was small, angular, and asymmetrical. A mismatched collection of alloys and exposed conduits. It was a perfect, miniature replica of the Nomad. The Vex had seen our ship, understood its ugly, chaotic design and had created a predator in its image. The tiny ship's engines flared with a cold, white light, and it began to move toward us. The hunt had changed. We were no longer just an anomaly to be cataloged. We were a specimen that had fought back. And now, the curator was sending in the taxidermist to prepare us for display. The Vex-forged replica of the Nomad was a mockery, a grotesque parody of our struggle for survival. It moved with a silent, predatory grace that our ship, with its groaning hull and shuddering engines, could never hope to match. It was our ghost, come to drag us down into the Vex's sterile version of eternity. On the bridge, the hellish red glow of the emergency lights painted a scene of desperation. Kalen was frantically trying to seal the forward bulkheads, his commands echoing in the sudden, terrifying quiet of a ship on the verge of death. Through the shattered view screen, the replica drew closer, its primitive-looking thrusters burning with a cold, impossibly efficient light. "It's matching our velocity, Captain," Kalen reported, his voice tight with a new kind of fear. It wasn't the fear of destruction, but the fear of the uncanny. It's not scanning us, but it's mirroring us. Every minor course correction I make, it makes. It's like it's wired directly into my helm. Anya's voice, weak but defiant, crackled over the comm from the smoke-filled engineering bay. "Eva, what in the seven hells is that thing?" "My sensors are going haywire. It has the energy signature of a fusion reactor, but the mass of a fighter drone. It doesn't make sense." "It's the Vex," I said, my voice a low growl. My head throbbed, and the taste of blood was coppery in my mouth. "It's showing us what it's learned. It's showing us it can be us, only better." My mind, reeling from the explosion and the sheer alien wrongness of the situation, latched onto a single, chilling thought. The Vex hadn't just copied our ship's design. When we had connected to it, when it had held our data link open, it hadn't just been stealing our history. It had been stealing our tactics. It knew about the wreckage belt. It knew about our reliance on the environment. It knew our desperation was our greatest weapon, and it had just created a tool to turn that weapon against us. "Kalen, get us moving," I ordered, forcing myself back into the captain's chair. The cold metal, a small comfort. "Take us deeper into the belt. I want the most cluttered, most dangerous sector you can find. We need to break its line of sight. It's anticipating my moves." "Eva," he protested, his hands hesitating over the controls. "Every time I try to chart a course, it's already there." "Then stop thinking like a pilot and start thinking like a scavenger," I snapped, the words coming out harsher than I intended. "Don't plot a course. Improvise. React. We're not trying to outrun it. We're trying to confuse it. Fly dirty." Kalen nodded, a spark of the old defiance returning to his eyes. The Nomad, crippled and bleeding, lurched into motion. We dove back into the metallic jungle of the wreckage belt, our ship a wounded beast seeking sanctuary in its lair. The replica followed, mimicking our every move with a horrifying precision. When we scraped our port side against the hull of a dead freighter, it deliberately scraped its own hull in the exact same spot, its alien materials showing no damage. When a piece of shrapnel from our self-inflicted blast struck our stern, it allowed a similar piece to strike its own, the impact absorbed without a tremor. It wasn't just chasing us. It was performing a clinical, mocking dissection of our flight. "It's learning," Kalen whispered, his face pale. "Every move we make, It's analyzing, cataloging our response patterns. Then we need to give it a response it can't predict, I said, my mind racing. The Vex thought in logic, in patterns, in data. Our greatest strength had always been our humanity, our chaos, our unpredictability, our willingness to do the illogical thing to survive. Anya, I said into the comm, how are our mining charges? There was a cough, and then her soot-stained voice replied, We've got 3 left. The launcher is offline, but I can prime them for manual detonation. Why you planning on redecorating? Something like that, I said, a desperate plan beginning to form. I need you to rig one of them to the main coolant line for the port engine. The coolant line. Her voice was sharp with alarm. Eva, if that blows, it'll flash freeze the entire engine block. The thermal shock will shatter it like glass. We'll lose the engine permanently. I know, I replied, my voice grim. Just do it. Prime it. But don't arm it. Wait for my signal. I turned to Kalen. There's a gravity well about 5 clicks from our current position, created by the collapsed core of that old Cygnian Axis warship. Remember it. He nodded. The maelstrom. We avoid it on our salvage runs. The tidal forces are strong enough to tear a ship apart. Exactly, I said, a cold smile touching my lips. Take us there, and I want you to make it look like we're fighting it, like our ship is dying and we're being pulled in against our will. The Nomad began to fly erratically, its movements becoming sluggish, its thrusters firing in panicked, unsynchronized bursts. We listed heavily to port, venting streams of coolant into the void, a visual sign of our engine's imminent failure. The Vex replica, true to its purpose, began to mimic our death throes. Its own movements became clumsy, its thrusters sputtered with simulated inefficiency. It was so confident in its data, so sure it understood our patterns of failure, that it was willing to replicate our dying moments perfectly. It saw our approach to the maelstrom not as a tactic, but as the final, inevitable result of our ship's damage. It was a logical conclusion, and the Vex were nothing if not logical. We drew closer to the collapsed warship core, a point in space where reality was warped and twisted. The Nomad groaned as the gravitational tides began to pull at us, stress alarms shrieking from every corner of the bridge. The replica followed, entering the gravity well's outer edge, its systems perfectly simulating the strain that was threatening to tear our actual ship to pieces. It's taking the bait, Kalen said through gritted teeth, his arms straining as he fought the helm. The gravity is stronger than I thought. I'm not sure I can pull us out, Eva. You won't have to, I told him, my eyes fixed on the distance indicator. We were falling into the trap together, our hunter and its prey, locked in a final, deadly embrace. Anya, on my mark, you're going to blow the charge and then immediately reroute all power from the port engine to the starboard one. I want every last joule of energy we have for a single, full throttle burn. It'll tear the starboard engine from its mountings, she yelled back. Good, I said. We only need it to work for about 5 seconds. The replica was now just behind us, slightly to our port side, perfectly positioned. It had followed our simulated engine failure so precisely that it had placed itself in the most dangerous part of the gravity well, mimicking our fatal trajectory. It was so focused on being our perfect mirror that it had failed to see the trap for what it was. We were seconds from the point of no return. The ship was shaking so violently I could barely stay in my seat. Now, Anya, I screamed. Far below us in engineering, Anya slammed her hand down on a detonator. The mining charge attached to the coolant line exploded. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. The supercooled liquid vented into the void in a massive, glittering cloud of ice crystals, while the thermal shockwave hit the port engine block with a sound like the world cracking in half. The entire engine shattered into a million pieces of superheated shrapnel. The loss of the engine's mass, combined with the explosive force, was like a giant hand slapping the port side of our ship. It didn't push us forward, it kicked our stern sideways, a violent, uncontrolled spin. At the exact same moment, Kalen, following my orders, jammed the throttle for the starboard engine to full. The engine, fed with the diverted power of its dying twin, roared with a suicidal fury. The combination of the spin from the explosion and the massive, asymmetrical thrust from the single remaining engine didn't push us out of the gravity well. It slingshotted us. We were thrown sideways, a chaotic, tumbling maneuver that no sane pilot would ever attempt and that no logical machine could ever predict. The Nomad tumbled violently through space, our artificial gravity failing completely. We were a broken toy, flung by a careless god. But we were moving away from the maelstrom. The Vex replica, however, was not. Its last data point had been our engine failure. It had been preparing to mimic our destruction within the gravity well. It had no frame of reference for our illogical, self-mutilating escape. It couldn't compute the tactic of destroying a part of yourself to save the whole. Caught in the maelstrom's grip, its trajectory locked. It tried to adjust. Its thrusters flared, but it was too late. The tidal forces seized the small ship. We watched on a secondary monitor as our own twisted reflection was stretched, warped, and then, with a silent flash of imploding light, crushed into nothingness. For a long moment, the only sound was the creak of our tortured hull and the faint, triumphant hiss of static from Anya's open comm. We had done it. We had survived, but the cost was immense. We were drifting, with only one functioning engine running on fumes, our bow shattered, our life support failing. We had won the battle, but we were stranded in the middle of the graveyard, with no way to get home. "Captain," Kalen said, his voice quiet, awestruck. We did it." I let out a long, shuddering breath, the adrenaline finally leaving me, replaced by an bone-deep exhaustion. Yes, we did. But my eyes weren't on the empty space where the replica had been. They were on the silent, obsidian teardrop of the main Vex ship, which had been observing the entire spectacle from a safe distance. It hadn't moved. It hadn't interfered. It had simply watched its creation, its perfect logical construct, be defeated by something it couldn't quantify. It had watched us sacrifice a limb to save the body. It had watched us embrace chaos. A new icon flickered on Kalen's damaged console, a direct data burst from the Vex ship. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a warning. It was a single, complex pictograph, a diagram of a spiral, with a second, smaller spiral branching off from it, a deviation from the expected pattern. Below it, our classification had been updated. The words "unidentified anomaly" were gone. They had been replaced by a new designation, one that sent a chill down my spine far colder than the vacuum of space. It read "Variant Human." We were no longer just a curiosity. We were a new variable in their grand equation of the cosmos. And I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my soul, that the Vex were not done with us. This wasn't the end of our encounter. It was the beginning of an entirely new kind of war. A war not for territory or resources, but for the very definition of what it meant to be alive. We were adrift, a broken shell clinging to life in a sea of dead gods. The silence that followed our victory was heavier and more terrifying than the chaos of battle. It was the silence of a tomb. The Nomad was dying around us, its systems failing one by one, the red emergency lights painting our exhausted faces in the color of dried blood. We had destroyed the replica, but the main Vex ship remained, an impassive black teardrop hanging in the void like a patient undertaker. It made no move to attack, no move to retreat. It simply watched, its silence a judgment more profound than any weapon. Life support is critical. Kalen's voice was a flat, defeated monotone, a stark contrast to his earlier adrenaline-fueled focus. He had managed to patch the worst of the hull breaches, but we were still bleeding precious air. At current consumption, we have maybe 6 hours of breathable atmosphere. The starboard engine is, well, it's not on fire, which is a miracle, but the fuel line is cracked. We're losing propellant with every passing second. He didn't need to finish the thought. We were a castaway on a sinking raft, with a shark circling just out of reach. Our home, Haven, was a week's journey away at minimum thrust, a journey we could no longer make. Our comms were down. Our long-range sensors were a ruin of melted circuits, and our hope was a rapidly dwindling resource. I closed my eyes, the throbbing in my head a dull, rhythmic drumbeat of failure. We had outsmarted the Vex, but for what? To die slowly and quietly in the dark, the irony was a bitter pill. We, the descendants of a species that had burned its own world, were about to be extinguished by the cold, indifferent vacuum of space. Our final act of defiance, a footnote in the Vex's vast archive. "Anya," I said, my voice hoarse, speaking into the dead air. "Anya, can you hear me?" For a long moment, there was only static. Then, a weak, pain-filled voice crackled back. "Still here, Captain, just admiring the new hole in my ceiling. You owe me a new engine room." Despite the direness of our situation, a weak smile touched my lips. "Add it to my tab." "What's your status?" "Broken," she said bluntly. 2 cracked ribs. I think. The shrapnel from the engine block turned this place into a blender, but the emergency power cell is intact. It's not much, but it's something. An idea, fragile and desperate, sparked in the darkness of my mind. The emergency power cell was designed to run the ship's most basic survival systems, a single medical bay, the emergency beacons, the data core's life support. It was a last resort, a final breadcrumb for any potential rescuer to follow. "The beacon," I said, my voice gaining a sliver of its former strength. "Anya, can you divert the entire emergency cell to the comm system, not the long-range transmitter, the tight beam array?" "The tight beam," Kalen looked at me, his brow furrowed in confusion. "Eva, that's a line-of-sight laser comm. Its range is negligible, and we'd have to have a target to aim it at. We're alone out here." "We're not alone," I replied, my gaze fixed on the impassive Vex ship. "It's still here. It's watching us. It's waiting. It updated our classification. It didn't just label us a threat. It labeled us a variant. It wants to understand us." The Vex were collectors of knowledge. They preserved cultures they deemed significant. But what did a curator do when it found a specimen that defied classification, a specimen that broke the rules of its collection? It didn't destroy it. It studied it. "You want to talk to it?" Kalen's voice was filled with disbelief. "Ava, it's an alien intelligence that tried to dissect us. What could we possibly say to it? We're not going to talk to it. I said, my plan solidifying. We're going to give it what it wants, more data. But we're going to give it the one piece of data it can't possibly have. The one thing it couldn't pull from our ship's computers because it doesn't exist in code. And what's that? A story, I said. Our story. It was the most insane gamble yet. A message in a bottle thrown at a Leviathan. Anya, guided by my instructions, managed to reroute the emergency power. The main bridge remained dark, but a single console flickered to life, the tight beam comms interface. We had one shot, a single burst of information before the power cell was completely drained. I sat before the console, my fingers hovering over the input panel. I wasn't going to send schematics or tactical data. I was going to send it the heart of Haven. I began with the Exodus. I transmitted the fragmented logs of the last generation ships, the desperate voices of our ancestors fleeing a burning Earth. I sent them the fear, the hope, the quiet courage of a people who had lost everything but each other. Then, I sent it the birth of Haven. I transmitted the personal logs of the first generation born in the Serpent's Coil, the wonder and terror of children who had never seen a blue sky or felt rain on their skin. I sent them our art, the crude sculptures carved from asteroid rock, the haunting melodies played on instruments fashioned from salvaged ship parts. I sent them our laws, our arguments, our love stories. I opened our archives, not of technology, but of humanity. Finally, I focused the tight beam array on the Vex ship, took a deep breath, and began to record a personal log of my own. I didn't speak as a captain to an enemy. I spoke as one being to another. I told it about my prosthetic arm, not the accident that caused it, but how Anya had built it for me from the salvaged arm of a Signian mining drone, and how it felt more a part of me than the flesh it had replaced. I told it about Kalen's obsession with stellar cartography, how he saw the swirling gases of the nebula not as a hazard, but as a celestial tapestry. I described the taste of the hydroponic rations we ate, the shared laughter in the mess hall, the quiet grief we held for the world we never knew. I gave it our pain, our resilience, our contradictions. I gave it our soul. And as the final dregs of power faded from the emergency cell and the console went dark, I ended my transmission with a single, simple image, a star chart of the Serpent's Coil, with a bright, pulsing light marking the exact location of Haven. Kalen stared at me, his face a mixture of horror and awe. Ava, what have you done? You just gave them a map to our home. No, I said, my voice quiet but firm, leaning back in my chair, an unexplainable calm settling over me. I just gave them a choice. It can see us as an anomaly to be collected, a variant to be cataloged, or it can see us as a culture, a people, with a home worth protecting. For a long time, nothing happened. The Vex ship remained motionless, a silent, black judge. The air on the bridge grew thin, and the cold of the void began to seep through the fractured hull. We had played our last card. There was nothing left to do but wait for the verdict. My consciousness began to fade, the lack of oxygen making my thoughts drift. I thought of my crew, my family. I thought of Haven, a fragile jewel hidden in the dark. I had either saved them or doomed them all. Then, on Kalen's darkened console, a single light flickered, a proximity alert. The Vex ship was moving, not toward us. It was turning, its sleek, teardrop form aligning with the vast emptiness of the outer galaxy. It wasn't powering weapons. It was opening a slipstream portal, a shimmering tear in the fabric of space-time. But before it left, it sent one final tight beam transmission. It wasn't a pictograph or a data packet. It was a single, perfect, impossibly complex musical tone. It was a chord that resonated with the melodies we had sent it. A harmony that was both alien and achingly familiar. It was a sound of acknowledgement, of understanding. Then, with a silent flash, the Vex ship was gone. We were alone again, but the silence felt different. It was no longer the silence of a tomb, but the quiet of a sanctuary. We were still crippled, still dying, but something had shifted in the cosmic balance. We had faced the unknown, not with weapons, but with vulnerability, and the unknown had, for a reason we might never comprehend, chosen to show us a sliver of grace. "Eva," Kalen whispered, his voice filled with wonder. "It's gone." Before I could reply, another light blinked on his console, this one angry and red, an unauthorized energy surge. "What now?" I groaned, my head lolling to the side. "Don't tell me it left behind a booby trap." "No," Kalen said, his eyes widening as he stared at his readings. This is impossible. The energy surge isn't external. It's coming from our main reactor." Anya's voice, sharp and lucid, cut through the comm. "It's not just the reactor. The fuel line in the starboard engine, the crack is sealing itself. The metal is. It's reknitting. Ava, the Vex, before it left, I think it fixed our ship." I struggled to sit up, my mind refusing to process what I was hearing. I stared at the main power grid on the helm. One by one, green lights began to flicker on. Life support system stabilized. The main reactor's output climbed steadily back to optimal levels. The ship was healing itself. The Vex's impossibly advanced nanotechnology working like a silent, invisible repair crew. They had not only spared us, they had given us a gift, a second chance, a message that was clearer than any words. Your story is not over. Continue. We were no longer just a variant. We were a culture deemed worthy of preservation, not in a museum, but in the living, chaotic universe. The Vex had come as an archivist, a collector, but it had left as a patron. And we, the last ghosts of humanity, had just been given the one thing we thought we had lost forever: a future. The resurrection of the Nomad was a quiet, unnerving miracle. It wasn't the noisy, chaotic work of a human repair crew. There was no clang of wrenches or hiss of welding torches. It was a silent, creeping restoration. We watched in stunned disbelief as fractured bulkheads smoothed over, as shattered conduits rewove themselves like threads in a loom, and as the gaping wound in our bow filled in, not with the mismatched alloys of our own scavenger engineering, but with a seamless, obsidian material that mirrored the hull of the Vex ship. They had not just repaired us, they had remade us. The ship that emerged from this silent rebirth was both familiar and profoundly alien. It was still the Nomad in shape and soul, but it was more. The engines no longer shuddered. They hummed with a deep, resonant power that felt ancient and unshakable. The new view screen that formed in the bridge was not a screen at all, but a perfect panoramic window into the void. The stars so crisp and clear they felt close enough to touch. Our systems were integrated, efficient, and intuitive in a way we couldn't have imagined. The Vex had given us a body worthy of our stubborn spirit. The journey back to Haven was surreal. We moved through the Serpent's Coil not as a struggling scavenger, but as a creature of the nebula itself. The gravitic currents that had once threatened to tear us apart now seemed to part before us, and we navigated the wreckage belt with an effortless grace. The Vex technology was a black box we couldn't hope to understand, a gift from a god we had accidentally befriended. But with this gift came a profound and heavy burden. The Vex had spared us, had helped us, because we had shown them something they valued, a story of chaotic, illogical, beautiful survival. We were no longer just hiding. We were now, in a strange way, curators ourselves, curators of the human spirit. We carried a responsibility to be the variant they had classified us as, to continue a story they had deemed worthy of an audience. When we finally arrived at Haven, our reappearance sent a shockwave of confusion and fear through the hidden colony. We were a ghost ship returning from the dead, transformed. My initial report to the Haven Council was met with suspicion and disbelief. I told them everything: the Vex, the battle, the destruction of the replica, and the final, incomprehensible act of grace. I told them about the choice I had made, the gamble of revealing our home. Elder Maeve, the stern matriarch who had led Haven for 50 years, fixed me with her piercing gaze. "You risked everything, Ava," she said, her voice like grinding stone. "You risked every soul on this rock for a story. It was the only weapon I had left." I replied, my voice steady, my conviction absolute. "We can't hide forever. Maeve, the galaxy is not empty. We've lived in the shadows for 200 years, and that silence has almost cost us everything. The Vex showed me that our weakness, our emotion, our chaos, our history is also our greatest strength. It's the one thing the great powers of this galaxy, with all their logic and technology, may have forgotten." The debate raged for days. Some called for my court-martial. Others saw the transformed nomad as a sign, a new covenant. But the turning point came from an unexpected source. Anya, her arm in a sling but her eyes blazing, projected the Vex's final transmission onto the main council chamber screen, the star chart. "Look," she said, pointing to the single pulsing dot that represented Haven. Captain Rostova didn't just give them a map. She gave them a symbol. She told them, "Here we are. This is our heart, and the Vex, a race that collects entire civilizations, chose to leave that heart beating." In the end, it was the transformed ship itself that swayed them. The Nomad was no longer just a vessel, it was a testament. It was proof that contact with the galaxy did not have to mean extinction. It could mean evolution. My command was restored, but my mission was irrevocably changed. We were no longer just the guardians of Haven, we were its ambassadors. Our patrols in the Serpent's Coil took on a new purpose. We did not seek out other races, but we no longer hid from them. The Nomad, with its strange hybrid of human and Vex design, became a legend in the forgotten corners of the galaxy. We encountered pirates, scavengers, and lost pilgrims. We shared our power, not as a weapon, but as a tool, helping a freighter restart its dead engine, sharing our energy reserves with a colony on the brink of freezing. We traded stories, not just goods. We learned of the Silix's rigid honor codes, the Ort Ascendancy's philosophical debates, and the Signian Axis's quest for perfect, logical order. We learned that the galaxy was not a monolithic entity, but a tapestry of countless cultures, each with its own fears and hopes. We were no longer a footnote. We were a new thread in that tapestry. Years passed. I grew older. The lines in my face a map of countless patrols and first contacts. Kalen became the foremost expert on xenocartography. His charts not just of stars, but of stories and traditions. Anya, working with the strange Vex materials, revolutionized Haven's technology, creating systems that were not just efficient, but adaptive, almost alive. We never saw the Vex again, but their presence was a constant, silent force in our lives. They had given us a future, and in doing so, had challenged us to be worthy of it. Our final mission under my command was to assist them on the very edge of the Serpent's Coil, where a pre-warp civilization was showing the first faint signs of reaching for the stars. Their world was torn by conflict, their environment scarred by nascent industry. It was a disturbingly familiar echo of old Earth. The great powers would have classified them as low priority, a noisy, self-destructive species, not yet worthy of notice. We parked the Nomad in the shadow of their moon and simply watched. We didn't interfere. We didn't make contact. We just listened to their frantic broadcasts, their songs of war and hope, their stories of love and loss. Kalen turned to me on the bridge, his hair now streaked with gray. What do we do? Ava. I looked at the blue-green marble of the planet, a world on the brink, a reflection of our own past. The Vex had made a choice about us. Now, we had to make a choice of our own. I smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached my eyes. We do what they did for us, I said softly. We listen to their story, and when the time is right, we make sure they have a future in which to tell it. We were the children of a fallen world, the ghosts who haunted the Galactic graveyard, but we had learned that a story, shared in the darkness, could be more powerful than any fleet. We were no longer just survivors. We were librarians. We were shepherds. We were the variant human. And our chapter in the great cosmic book was only just beginning.